Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me here today as we get to talk about one of my favorite subjects, comic books. My name is Jose. I love comic books. I love talking about them, and I love sharing them with you. Feel free to follow me on social media if you would like. Links are in the description below. I've also posted a link to the Marvel fan site that I have plot synopsis and character bios for this issue. We're continuing our run of the Uncanny X-Men, and we're looking today at issue number 228. It is a flashback issue. Um, I don't know whether or not Chris Claremont wanted to give Mark Silvestri a break and then continue on their run. So this issue is basically a solo story between Wolverine and Dazzler. And we've got this cover by Rick Leonardi and Terry Austin, who returns as guest inker in this issue. Beautiful screen tones being applied here. And so here we have an angel with Wolverine and Dazzler, and you see the in memoriam here. And so, um, Deadly Games is our title. And here in the credits, we got a little bit of a weirdness here. Chris Claremont is simply the scripter. Rick Leonardi is pencils. Terry Austin is inks. There is a different colorist in Bill Ray. Tom Rozakowski, as always, deserves every award ever for having to letter so many letters. And Anna Senti and Tom DeFalco continue with the editorial. However, you're going to see under Tom DeFalco, who is the editor-in-chief, but it says guest plotter. So it's just weird that Claremont didn't do it, and here Dazzler doesn't have a nose. So we start out in the table. You can see a gun here. You can see some bourbon, newspapers, some pictures here, and a letter. Now, this letter is basically going to tell the entire story that we are going to see here, or that we're about to go through. So his name is not Oz, it's O-Z. You see the points, sorry, not the points, the periods. So it's O-Z. So when you see, when I was growing up, I said Oz, but I don't know, I never noticed the periods here. And you can see his reflection here on this. So he's drinking beer too and doing shots here. And so you'll see why at the end here. So he receives a letter from Dazzler, and it's going to tell this story. So she is working out in the danger room. This part will go quick because it's just there for fill-in. And as she's practicing, I love Leonardi's art. I really do. I think he would have been better, or been even better, if he would have gotten a regular gig. I think Spider-Man 2099 was his only regular gig. I know that he did a couple of fill-in issues for Uncanny. He did fill-in issues. I think he did also 8 issues of oh my goodness, Cloak and Dagger. But for the most part, he really didn't do much except fill-in work. And so Wolverine interrupts her work out there in the danger room, and of course that is going to make her get taken down, and of course dies here. You can see, bang, you're dead. And she gets mad. She's like, why didn't you lend me a hand? He's like, you have to learn to stand on your own. And she tells him, hey, I used to be alone before I joined this turkey outfit. So she takes a shower. By the way, this takes place before Uncanny X-Men 220 and 221. This is where this story would fit in continuity here. So she talks with Rogue, telling him, Wolverine means well, wants the best for anyone. Here, Psylocke is reading a newspaper and comes across this story. It says, a murderer in Florida reputed to be a werewolf. She wonders if it's a mutant like Wolfsbane. And of course she sees him and says, O.Z. Chase. And he says he's no more a killer or werewolf than I am. And look at this, freelancers underpaid. Ha ha ha. And so Wolverine's like, you shouldn't leave. Everyone's after the X-Men now. I like this bit of her eating the apple here. And she's like, I know the risk, but OZ's a friend. I owe him too much to stand by and do nothing when he's in trouble. And he offers backup, and she says, no, this is a personal affair and doesn't involve the X-Men. She is taking a taxi to take her to the airport, and she says, I will be in touch. Oh, by the way, Wolverine says, when you're part of a team, everything you do involves us. So she's gonna head out, and Wolverine, or sorry, Rogue is like, she'll be okay. She took on the Juggernaut, and so but you can see that Wolverine's gonna get involved. Plus, from the cover here. So here in the Florida Panhandle, not far from the Alabama line, there's these guys living in some farmers here, and this guy's driving through. I guess the guy goes and says, "Hey, Mister, be careful with how you're driving that truck here." And you can see that he has powers of some kind, shoots and most likely kills that poor farmer. And she's like, "Oh, Thomas." And so Dazzler arrives in Miami, and she's met by Wolverine here. And I love it. He's wearing a Hawaiian shirt with his cowboy hat. And she's like, "Hey, I thought I told you guys that I would handle this alone." And Wolverine's like, "This one, did I ever do what I was told? But this guy here, keep an eye on him because he is going to follow them." And so she says, OZ, I remember his last name is Chase, has a dog called Cerberus. And she says, "Is he's meaner than you?" Meaning Wolverine. And she wonders if he's the one that caused all those wounds. And so she goes and says, "I'll go to the police station and see if they'll let me see Chase." That's his last name again. And I like this. Wolverine says, "I got us rooms at the Bates Motels. I'll take your bags over there." So Wolverine leaves, but this guy is behind. Of course, Wolverine knows that this guy was following them, so he goes back, and you can see he pops his claws and he says, "You got a name, bub, or a reason for playing our shadow?" And I don't think that he gave him a chance to answer because he just hits him. And here he's got his takes his gun away. So the cops here don't want her to see him, and she goes, "And I want to talk to his lawyer." He's like, "The public defender's gone fishing. If you leave a number, we'll make sure he gets in touch." She's like, "Yeah, right." And so she, was this supposed to be Miami? Because I swear to God, this does not look like Miami. Anyway, so she's going to go into his truck, but there's a Cerberus, and he is a nice little puppy. And so she heads off to the motel here. And so she says her and Wolverine took notes on what happened, and Wolverine says fella has a Russian base accent and packing a Tokarev 9mm standard KGB issue, which would have been that gun he took. And she wonders how they're involved. And he says, "That's a good question. Chase is the key." But she says, "Can't get near him." And he says, "Wanna bet." So they get Wolverine and arrest him for public disorderly conduct here. Kind of pretending that he is drunk. So they throw him in a cell here. And here is I almost said Oz, OZ. And this guy comes in, or these people come in, and they're like, "Mr. Chase." And so Wolverine, of course, is paying attention. And OZ says, "Who wants to know?" And they say, "Friends in a position to help you in this time of need, provided you do the same for us in return. We're interested in your quarry." And Ozzy says, "Look, everything I know is on the police report." And the Russians here says, "One of our colleagues is missing. Perhaps you can account for that." And he's like, "Hey, I've been here this past week." And so you can see they take their guns, and Wolverine pops his claws, and he's like, "Hey, what gives around here?" And of course, they said, "You're a loose end," and they're tidy. And so Wolverine breaks, or not breaks, slashes through the um, bars, and so um, he's like, "Hey, I got a claim on this dude, and I don't want him dead." And so Wolverine takes care of these two, and Chase helps him, and he says, "Hey, I'm Wolverine, and we have a friend, a mutual friend, Dazzler." And OZ says, "Hey, it's not my style to bust out of jail." And he's like, "Hey, if you stay here, they're gonna kill you." So they go to the motel here, and they're like, assuming you're innocent, OZ." And he's like, "Assuming." Um, Wolverine, I think it's this is Wolverine. "Someone's gone into a lot of trouble to frame you, and someone else, it seems, is going to uh, as much trouble to have you killed." And Dazzler says, "What the heck are you mixed up in?" And he's like, "I have no idea." And so he says, "I thought this was an ordinary skip trace." I think he's a parole, a bond bailsman. So, what is the other name? Like the bounty hunter. And so he says, "A while back, LAPD nailed a top-notch Colombian drug dealer. Bust of the century, they called it. The DA wanted the guy held without bail, but the judge saw different. Went for 8 figures instead, figuring nobody'd run on that much loot. Imagine his surprise when the guy did precisely that. On the assumption of the man had fled out of the state, the DA's office brought me in, um, uh, feeling that I got, my God, sorry, feeling I got was that they didn't trust the feds on this, but no one would tell me why." Oh my gosh, I don't know why that was so hard to read. And so you can see Ozzy here and the dog here. Took a while, but the trail led to the glades, meaning the Everglades. And so he continues. He had a small army protecting him. Um, the dog, I mean, we cut him down to size. Man didn't seem too bothered to see me. Never seen eyes as cold as his, like a shark's, no mercy, less humanity. And so he comes behind them, and it looks like he has powers. And he goes, he smiled and began to glow. And so that is who we saw in the beginning here. And so he had energy bars coming through and knocked them out. And then the police showed up here. And he says, "He must have assumed he'd kill me. Luckily, my bulletproof vest took the brunt of the zap because he left without finishing me off. When I finally came to, the cops had arrived. Cerberus took off himself. He doesn't respond well to authority. Figures while I tried groggy as I was to explain what had gone down. Law wasn't interested. Next thing I knew, I was being booked for multiple homicides. The guy had obviously fried his own people to punish him. I guess there's no stopping me, but I was taking the fall, and that, my friends, is all I know." And so Wolverine says, "Is he a Colombian?" He says, "No, Caucasian, foreigner." And he goes, "Got a picture?" And he looks at him, and it is a Russian. And he says, "Hey, I tussled with them a while back." And so Dazzler, of course, says, "Hey, if he's a Soviet spy, why are the other spies chasing him?" And he says, "Perhaps they're a rescue team, or Blad's become an embarrassment." And so there's a knock on the door, and um, Dazzler is like, "Hey, are those the Russians?" So after Wolverine says that they don't knock, he says their scent tells him it's someone just as bad, and it's Henry Peter Gyrick from the CIA, or Marvel's version of the CIA, kind of a mean Nick Fury here. And so he says that of course he's part of the NSA and he wants to talk to them, and he's like don't call me Hank. And so, because he says, still a company boy, Hank. And so, Wolverine says, when I worked for the Canadian Special Intelligence Service, Hank here was my CIA liaison. So, old buddy, what brings you to this neck of the woods? And he says, that mutant guy. 5 years ago, we thought we turned him a prized defection. Um, so he explains here that he was going to give them information on the Soviet superpowered program, and that he charged a lot, a million in gold, but he double crossed them. And so he took both the KGB and the U.S. for fools and left to Colombia and became a cocaine king. And so he says there was issues down there with rival gang lords, and the police got him, but they didn't know who he was, and so he ended up skipping town. And so it says the KGB sent basically hitters, assassins, and he's like, we got to get him first. Wolverine says, you want me to do it? And Henry says, you have the skills, and it certainly wouldn't hurt the X-Men's reputation to cooperate with the federal government in this matter. And so he says, Zeitz's crimes don't matter, he asks. And Garrett says, not your concern, just bring him in, Wolverine, alive. Leave the rest to us. Love this costume so much. So Wolverine believes he's going on his own. He's going through the Everglades here, only to find out that both Ozzy and Dazzler with the dog are waiting for him, and does the same thing. We're beginning to wonder if you'd ever show. And so all three of them are going to go here. And Wolverine asks, how'd you find me? And he's like, the dog. And so they hear gunshots, and it looks like they have the Russian corner. Well, the Russians have the Russian corner here, and so he uses his powers here. And Wolverine and Dazzler and Ozzy arrive, and so he's like, so whatever, Tovarish, we meet again. And he says, but I suspect for the last time. And Wolverine says, that, bub, is a fact. I think this here is a border on this, not sound effect, on this bubble. And I think it should have been colored, most likely. But I think they missed it here. And so these two go at it here. And so we're just gonna narrate here, and so you can see him using the powers. Kind of hits him in the arm, and it says here, hard enough to paralyze it here. And so he's about to use his power, but Dazzler also has power of her own, and so she disorients him, and he takes off. And Wolverine here, this looks so badass. He goes, should have just used your photon blast to deck him, Daz. Or better yet, your laser job to finish the job. And so Wolverine goes after him, and he says, Dazzler, 9 o'clock. And she gets grazed. And she does this spinning, the Luca effect here, and uses her power to hit this guy. Wolverine comes from behind and slashes him. You can see this magenta being used. The guy doesn't like that too much, and shoots Wolverine with his power and begins running away. And you can see that he's bleeding here. He says, Gyrich, you pompous toad, I hold you to promise, American, come before me. But before I tell you a word, I demand, I insist, you have these 3 bounties. The man, woman, the girl executed. That's my price grid. Their lives for mine. But here comes the dog. And she says, I guess Cerberus considered that a pretty fair deal, and kills this guy here. So, doesn't look like Gyrich is going to get anything. and they say, sorry, our bad. And he's like, "You'll be sorrier when I'm through with you. Do you have the harm? Do you have any idea of the harm you'll do this country?" And she's like, "He was a murderer, a drug dealer. I'm not gonna lose any sleep over that." So, um, the take off, and kind of a bit of a well happy ending, but of course the end of the letter here. And so this guy reads in the paper and he's like, "Yes, me, it's good riddance. Those beauties got what they deserve." And so Ozzy is like, "Those were my friends and we have issues with that." And so he makes them um uh, raise a toast to Dazzler and the X-Men. And so he gets into the car and puts the picture of her in the visor. I know it's got another name, but the anyway, she puts her picture there, and she says, "Sweet Dazzler, this one's for you." And so next, we're gonna start the um, X-Men in the Australian outback, which is going to run to X-Men 249. So, all right. Well, actually, it's gonna go longer than that. My bad. It's actually gonna go longer than that. So, anyway, Uncanny X-Men 228 by Chris Claremont, Rick Leonardi with Terry Austin. Like and subscribe, and I do thank you so much for listening. Goodbye.